Hello students, welcome to class 11. In this class, those who have opted for biology, for them I would like to suggest you that besides your NCERT book, you should be only following any one reference book which you feel you're comfortable to learn and understand. Don't go for too many books because too many books will be confusing you. So the best book is this, your textbook, which is the NCERT book of biology, both for class 11 as well as for class 12. For the class 12 students also, I have told to only follow the NCERT biology. Similarly, for your class also, you should follow this book, that is NCERT biology. Now in this biology syllabus, what you have for your class 11, there are a total of your 5 units, and all these 5 units is further divided into various chapters, and a total of 22 chapters you have in class 11. And now out of the various chapters which are being discussed, you will be finding many similarities with your class 9 syllabus and some with class 10 also, as well as when you will be going to class 12, then also you will find that there are some similarities with class 10 as well as class 12. So my earnest suggestion to you is that if you have the NCERT book of your class 9 and 10, please keep it also with you. Do not give it to somebody else, because there are some basic fundamental things which have been discussed in those books of class 9 and 10 of biology portion, which will be helpful for you to have a clear idea about the chapters which are in elaborate form in class 11 and 12. So our chapters which have been discussed in class 11, they are many, but the first thing which has been discussed is the unit 1, and in this unit 1 we have 4 chapters, and the unit 1 basically deals with the diversity of the various living organisms. Now see, when we talk about biology, the first thing which you should be knowing about biology is that who coined the term biology. Now there is a scientist, you know this scientist well, his name was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and he is the scientist who coined the term biology, but he is not the father of biology. There are some terminologies like father of biology. Who is known as the father of biology? Now father of biology is yet another Greek philosopher and scientist. His name was Aristotle. So Aristotle is known as father of biology, but the term biology was coined by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Besides this, you should also know about a person who is very important to this first 4 chapters. His name is called Carolus Linnaeus. Now Carolus Linnaeus, why he is important? In the sense that he was the first person who actually named the different kinds of living organisms. See, living organisms live in different habitats, isn't it? You can find living organisms in the Arctic regions, in the polar regions. If you go, you can find the living organisms. If you go to desert, you can find the living organisms in rainforest, whatnot. Whichever place you will go, you will find the living organisms living in the different kinds of habitats. Now these are so many. Some are of the opinion they are in millions, 1.7 to 1.8 million living organisms residing on this earth. Imagine. And we hardly know hundreds of their names. Not even hundreds, I guess. If somebody asks you about the biological name, I am sure that not even hundreds names are there in your mind, isn't it? So this man took the initiative. He was, you can say, the first person to name an organism, and his system of naming the organism is known as your binomial nomenclature. So since he named the organism, and he did in his he published a book, it was called as your Species Plantarum. In that he named hundreds and hundreds of organisms named, including both plants and animals, and just for that thing, to give him a respect, he is known as the father of taxonomy. Another person you should be knowing, who is also being mentioned in your book in the beginning of the that is your the first unit, that is Ernest Mayr. Now this scientist, he lived for 100 years, and he worked in various fields, including your taxonomy, including your ornithology, including your evolution, including many branches of sciences. So, and he is among the one of the 100 famous scientists all around the world of his own time, and he's also known as the Darwin of 20th century. So this person is also important, and you should know about these scientists. Why I'm mentioning these scientists? Because these are also very important terminologies and the things which you should be knowing before going deeper into the parts of the chapters mentioned in the diversity of the living world. So the first chapter is the living world, in which we have to learn what is being living. Now, what is being living means there are various criteria for being living, isn't it? We have seen that being living is associated with growth. The first fundamental thing is of course of movement. Living things shows movement, but plants show restricted movement, of course, and the animals show both movement and locomotion. The next most important criteria is about growth. Living things grow, non-living things do not grow. We have been reading this from our childhood days, isn't it? Living things grow, yes, it is true, but after a certain age, the animals especially, their growth really stops. Means you cannot find any physical growth in them, but plants show growth which is throughout their life. You cut the branches of the plant, after a few weeks or after a few days you will find new small vegetative buds are coming out, branches are coming out, and all those things. So growth is a characteristic of living things, but it is always not true. You can find sometimes the non-living things also grow bigger and bigger due to some deposition, external deposition of substances over them. And now this also can be we can say that growth is happening in them, but of course it is not because of a result of cell division or cell multiplication. So in case of living things, it is because of the growth in the cell size and cell number, because of which growth takes place. So growth as such cannot be considered as a definite parameter for being alive, although it is one of the parameter, but it is not a definite parameter. Then there is another thing like reproduction. Reproduction, also living things reproduce, whether it is asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. We have seen in our previous classes living things show reproduction, but non-living things do not reproduce, isn't it? But tell me about those organisms which are living but they don't reproduce. Like you might have heard about an organism called mule, isn't it? Now the mule is formed as a result of cross between a horse and a donkey. So when there is a cross between a horse and that of a donkey, we get a mule. But this mule which we are getting is a sterile organism. That means it cannot have its progeny, it cannot have its next generation. Every time you need a mule, you have to cross between a horse and a donkey. So if it is like that, if it is not able to reproduce, does it mean that it is not a living organism? So in this way, we cannot say that reproduction is a definite parameter for being alive or for calling an organism to be living. So then there are organisms like you might have heard about drones in the honeybee population. Drones are the the one which are formed as a result of the unfertilized egg getting hatched directly into drones. Then there are the sterile female workers who cannot produce egg. So then in case of human population also, there are some couples who cannot have their normal child, isn't it? Because either of the partners are unable to produce the gametes, so they can't have their next progeny. So if it is like that, does it mean that they are not alive? So this is also not a definite parameter to be calling an organism to be alive. Then the next thing which we should be considering is about metabolism. Metabolism is at the level of cellular level. It can be at the organelle level. So metabolism is the one in which simple substances, they combine to form complex molecules, or the complex molecules they break down to form the simple substances. So it is formation and destruction. Formation and destruction. Formation is known as anabolism, and destruction is known as catabolism. And anabolism and catabolism togetherly is known as your metabolism. So metabolism can be a criteria of an organism to be living. That means metabolism happens in case of living cells, organelles, organism as a whole. But is it not that sometimes some reaction, metabolic reactions, which are living reactions, also can happen outside the body? There are, some kinds of enzymes released from the body of the yeast into the substrate, and the substrate now can undergo the changes to form the products. So here living reaction is happening, but it is happening extracellular. That means it is coming out of the cell and then the reaction is taking place. So here also you see a metabolic reaction is happening, isn't it? But it is happening outside the body. So metabolism, when it is happening inside the living cell, then it is definitely a criteria of living organisms. But always metabolism, the metabolic reactions are which are happening outside the body, they are the living reactions, but they are not happening inside the living body. So always it is not always right to assign the metabolism also to be one of the parameters or criteria of being alive. Now in your book, many other characteristics are also taken into consideration for what is being alive or what is being living. Another very important and fascinating characteristic which has been taken in your book is about consciousness. That is, living things respond to stimuli. Response. They are conscious. Living things are conscious, isn't it? Human beings are self-conscious. All other organisms are conscious about their surroundings, but living things, along with the consciousness about the surroundings, they are self-conscious also, isn't it? Now this consciousness is a characteristic of being alive, or what is being living. Here is also one controversy. Now what is the controversy all about? That sometimes you will find some human beings due to some internal organ failure or some kind of paralytic attack or the cerebral attack, the person goes to coma. So in this case what happens, a person when goes to coma is supported by the various kinds of machineries, that means their life supporting systems will be there, which will be controlling their respiration, which will be controlling their heart functioning and all those things. So the person is living. That means the person's activities is being controlled by the machineries, but the person loses his or her consciousness. The person is no longer self-conscious, neither being conscious, and in this particular condition a person can live for many years before he or she dies, or sometimes they can again regain back their consciousness. So this the span of time when this person goes or is not knowing about the things happening all around him or her and is not conscious at all. So in that case, this criteria of consciousness is one of the criteria for being living. We cannot assign it truly to be one of the characteristics for being living. Living things have a definite lifespan, of course, but you will find some lower group of organisms like bacteria, isn't it? In case of bacteria, the bacteria multiplies by binary fission, so the parent cell actually divides into two daughter cells, so there is no death of the organism. So ultimately you can say the assemblage of the things or the characteristics which I have talked about today, all these things are the criteria or the things to make an organism alive, but no specific characteristic you can say no, this is the definite characteristic for being alive. So all these things togetherly will make an organism alive. In some cases one may be absent, in some cases one may not be functional, but we cannot take that parameter to be the only parameter to be being alive. So there are various parameters which we have talked about. All the parameters when will be functioning, the sum total will make an organism being alive. So that is all about what is being living and the introduction of this chapter all about. and then we will be moving on to the next section of our chapter in the next class to come, that is diversity in the living world. Now, so I hope this introductory class was a little bit interesting and beneficial for you to start with.